In this lesson, we'll take a look at how we can use the deformation palette to modify our model based on different kinds of deformers, and also how to utilize that method with masking. So let's take a look here, and this is just, again, a sphere so that we can see how things work before we get into something more complex. So what we want to do is go into the tool palette and go into the deformation subpalette. We're going to skip the first section and come down to the last section. And all of these different deformers, you can see they all have a slider and they all have 3 axes which they can function on. And so what they're going to do is they're going to create whatever sort of effect that they do on any of the unmasked polygons on your mesh. So in this case we have a sphere. It's been subdivided a few times and everything is unmasked, so there's no mask on this. So let's take a look at what we can do here. So for instance, there's one called gravity. So what we can do is slide this up or down. We'll increase the effect by going to the right. And you can see it's giving us the effect of gravity kind of weighing down this object. Okay. Now this is assuming that this axis is the axis on which gravity is pulling. So if you wanted to pull it in a different direction, you could change the particular axis. All right. We can also come in here and perhaps taper the object. So we could taper it down in 2 axes by choosing taper, or we could twist it. Or we could come in here and add some noise to the model and just kind of rough it up a little bit. Okay. Now again, all of these sliders will zero out whenever you add that. So if you add a certain amount, it'll go back and pop back to 0. We can go back and kind of smooth this out a little bit if we want to, kind of smooth things over. And again, if you want to do that a few different times, you can just repeat that process. And each time, the action that you choose will be performed on the particular model. Okay, so that's really cool. We can create different kinds of effects. We can bend things and size them. We can kind of inflate them out. But we can also do it along with a mask so that we can get different pieces that are raised off of the surface, for instance, things like that. So, for instance, we could come in here on the side. Let's turn off perspective, and let's just mask off everything but the top of this kind of cone shape now. So from here, what we could do is we could offset this. So we could say I want it to move to the right, and that just moves that unmasked area to the right. Or we could change the size. So we can increase the size here. Give it a little cap on it. Or we could take it down in size. Decrease the size like that. Or we could just take the size in the Y direction. Take it down like that. Okay. We can also come in here and create a more intricate shape. So let's say we'll turn on symmetry and we'll use Y symmetry, and we'll turn on radial symmetry, and let's set the radial count to 12. Okay, so this is what we get. So here we can come in, we'll turn on masking by holding down Control, and we can start to come in and add different effects here. I'm going to use Control and Alt to unmask different areas. So we can come in and mask areas like that. We can also choose different strokes and alphas to be able to add. So we come in here like this and pull out a ring right in there. Okay, and again we can change this out. Maybe add a kind of a line coming down here. And right now this is all just the mask. But now we can use this mask to apply our deformation. So I'm going to go ahead and actually mask off the top as well. So we just have these areas that we've masked off or unmasked, really. You can do it either way. If you want to add those as a mask and then invert it, you could do that too. But now we can come in using something like inflate, which will pull the polygons out along their normal, and we can actually pull that detail off the surface, and it'll be pulled off the exact same amount. So kind of bring that in, something like that, and you can see that all that mask detail has been pulled off of the surface and inflated. Then if you want to unmask, we can just hold down Control and drag, and then we can sculpt and smooth as we would normally. Okay, again, if we want to add something else, maybe this time it's a little bit different. So we'll choose, again, symmetry in the Y, but this time we'll dial this down to maybe 5. And here we'll actually mask out some areas. So we'll just create kind of a simple shape. Maybe we want to come in and sharpen it, so we'll unmask that area. Maybe something like that. Maybe kind of cut off the bottom a little bit. Just some sort of a design. Then we want to invert that. Oops. So we want to control click in the canvas or invert for our masking subpalette. Now in this case we'll choose inflate, but we'll change the slider to go in the opposite direction. So this time we'll pull it to the left, and that'll actually push that geometry into the surface. And because we've added that noise, you can see there's a little bit of roughness there because of that, but you can get an idea of what that looks like. So we're taking the unmasked areas, because it's got this gradient on the edges, it's not completely sharp, we don't get a completely sharp look there. And then if you want to come in, you can kind of smooth out that area inside there. Okay, you can see that as I have smooth selected, I'm going in and I'm smoothing this. It's actually smoothing the other ones as well. And then I can go in and get rid of that masking, and there we've got some nice detail. So using masking with our deformation subpalette is a great way to get repeated shapes that you need to be either pressed into the surface or pushed off of the surface an equal amount. So all of these are pulled out or pushed in the same amount because it was all based on one deformation that we did, in this case an inflate, but you could use this with other deformation, other of these deformers as well. But that's one deformer that you'll use probably quite a bit, and it's a very useful one too. Okay, so keep in mind when you need to change the shape of your models, you could do so parametrically using these deformers, and you can also decide what parts of your model to mask off and then have just those unmasked portions affected by the particular deformer based on these sliders and based on whatever axis you select over here on the right hand side. Okay, so a great way to kind of modify the shapes of your models in certain ways, and also to add kind of raised detail. Think of things like scales or mechanical details that you've got everything raised off a specific amount. You do that a couple times and you've got some nice layers of detail there that you've created with your masking. Okay, so that's the deformation subpalette, and how we can use it along with the masking that we talked about in the last lesson. So the next thing that we want to talk about is something that's very important to working with geometry in ZBrush, and that's polygroups. And that's really just a way of selecting different polygons and being able to separate those out and work on those separately. And it's going to be very important to a lot of the tools that are available here in ZBrush. So in the next lesson, we will talk about polygroups.